Here, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Um, yeah, we're really happy to see you all again after we took a break last month. Yeah, and just hope you all had a good holiday season. Yeah, with just friends and family and all that. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and jump right in. So today we're doing like a special spotlight presentation. Um, from Leah's Pantry. We have our presenter, Carrie Richerson here, who, yeah, we'll just be talking a little bit about nutrition, and then trauma-informed nutrition programs and things like that. So, yeah, I'll go ahead and let Carrie introduce herself, and yeah, we'll go ahead and get started.
Introduce the team real quick, Sarah.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Happy New Year. This is it. Yeah, so I'll just introduce the team really quick. Crystal, you can go first.
Thanks. Crystal Bleisha, Program Director with Partners for Wellness. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Aaron, I'll shoot it to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Erin O'Flaherty, Community Engagement Manager with Partners for Wellness slash Connective C. I'm excited to see you all today.
Hi everyone, I'm Vivi Vu. I'm also one of the other outreach coordinators. Happy New Year and happy to be here.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all well. I'm Joy Medina. I'm also an outreach coordinator on the team. So happy.
Awesome. All right, Carrie, it's all you.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you for joining on a Friday morning, the first full week of January. I'm sure it's been a week for everyone. At least I feel that, right? Remembering like what's my password, what's my job, all of those things can be hard this time of year. So thank you for joining. Couple quick announcements. It's going to be interactive. I'm going to be sharing a lot of information. The interaction's probably going to come a little bit on the back end, but definitely get ready to come off mute to put things in the chat. We'll be using Mentimeter as well. We won't be doing any breakout rooms though. Feel free to use the chat features, emojis, anything throughout the presentation. I have it up. I'll be keeping an eye on it. I see some cameras on. That's great. If you are in a position where you can turn it on at any time, that's wonderful to feel as though I'm not just speaking into the abyss. Of course, being mindful of background noise, and as you know, the session's being recorded. So before we get into our content today, I do want to introduce Leah's Pantry. I think some of you are familiar with our organization, but it's probably new to others. So first, we are not a food pantry. You can think of us as a pantry of resources, if you will. We are a nonprofit based in California, but we work across the US and we work in the space of trauma-informed nutrition education. So things that we do, we work in home communities delivering cooking, nutrition, physical activity programs. We also do a lot of work developing programs that can be used by anyone working with community in the space of nutrition and cooking. And then we train folks on how to use our programs, and then we do a lot of capacity building training like this one, where I'm not training you on a specific curriculum or program, but we're talking just generally about how to take a trauma-informed approach to your work. So we do a lot of this type of work as well. Here's just a snapshot of some, not all of our programs. I'm going to talk about these a little bit on the back end, so not going to spend a lot of time here, but just to give you an idea. And these programs are for all age groups and priority populations. We have stuff specifically for K through 12 schools, for emerging adults aged like 14 to 21, for college students, for caregivers, for dads, for older adults, ECE, we kind of have it all. Okay, so a quick little attunement. We already covered it's Friday, kind of the first Friday in January, maybe second if you worked last week, right? But where are you feeling today? Just take a moment to check in. You feel free to share in the chat, or you can think to yourself, feel like a merge of 7 and 8 of like, I made it through the first week. First week back for my daughter for school too. So that's, fun. See an 8, a 7. I'm often like a combo of 3 and 4. I kind of just like those sheep, but also I just feel like that's often where I'm at, and I see some 3s and 4s. So a variety. Well, as many of you know, it can be valuable to tune into ourselves and to practice that self-attunement so that we are able to better connect and attune with others, which is important when we're doing interpersonal and community-based work. So wherever you're at today, I invite you to kind of put that aside and stay with us for the next hour plus. What we will be doing today is first, we will be exploring the relationship of trauma, resilience, and nourishment. Now, my understanding is that most, if not all of you, have a pretty good background on the topics of trauma and resilience. What I will aim to do for you today is to connect that to the topic of food and nutrition. We will then on the back end do a little bit of, and this is where the interaction comes in, taking a trauma-informed lens or approach to the work that you do. And then at the end, I'll share some resources as well. So to get started, I invite you, and you can either, if you want to join on your phone, use the QR code, or in the chat, I just dropped a link. We will use Mentimeter throughout. So this is just to get you to open it, and just leave it open once you have it open. But just want to kick it off. I've got a lot of background on the group as a whole, but wanting to know really who's in the room today and how does your work intersect with nutrition or food security? So let's hear initially who we have. And I do not have tech support today. It's just me. So I am relying on all of you to let me know if anything is not working. Okay, good. Seeing that folks are on here. Give you a moment to type. And can you all see the shared screen of the responses coming through? Yes, okay, great. Okay, so we are, seeing certainly a mix, some related to tobacco use prevention, transitional age youth, families, some mention of food pantries and students. I'm imagining that's college based on what I know about you all. And some nutrition classes. Great. Okay, well, this is helpful and good for you all. I think you all know each other pretty well, I assume, but also probably good for you to see, just to keep in mind when we get to the part of like, okay, let's apply this to, because each of your work is different. So that will look different. So thank you. So I always like to start with this quote. It says, "The journey to becoming trauma-informed is not a linear one, and there is no single roadmap or checklist to complete. It requires constant attention, caring awareness, sensitivity, and possibly a cultural change at an organizational level." So this is kind of a disclosure statement, right? All right, I'm going to present a somewhat condensed presentation for you. And let's set expectations. At the end of this presentation, you might have more questions than you did at the beginning. You will not have a clear cut, like, all right, 5 things, we're going to implement this, we're done, right? This is a process and it is a journey, and all of you are on this journey at different places. So some of this may be many of what I will present, much of what I will present, I'm sure you're doing in some way, shape, or form. And so you're all kind of on a different place in this journey to begin with. So let's talk first about what is a trauma-informed approach. So, and I usually have a slide that talks about trauma-specific services versus a trauma-informed approach. So I want to be very clear that what I am talking about today is a trauma-informed approach. And this is best illustrated by the curb cut effect, right? When the city planners put in this sidewalk, they did this curb cut, and they did not need to know who was going to be using the sidewalk when they did that. They did not need to do an ACEs screening or a curb use screening, right? They knew that this curb cut is good for everyone. The wheelchair, yes, but also the person pushing the stroller, pulling the suitcase, riding the bike, the skateboard, walking with a cane, or somebody who's just a little clumsy, walking day to day, right? And that's what we're talking about. Trauma-specific services is treating specific trauma. And some of you may do that in your work, but that's just not what we're talking about today. So I am going to refer to substance abuse and mental health services administration several times. We use some of what they have done in the realm of trauma and resilience and different frameworks. And then I'll kind of apply that to food and nutrition. So I'm going to briefly walk through what is trauma, and they define trauma using the 3 E's: event, experience, and effect. So when we are thinking about the event, it is important to know first that the event is not the trauma. So when we're thinking about adverse events, many people may go through, COVID-19 is on here. Everyone in the world experienced COVID-19. Not everyone in the world has resulting trauma from that, right? So we really want to first distinguish the event as just one of the E's. We've got the household events, and this is what kind of the original ACEs study with Dr. Vincent Folletti here in San Diego, actually, where I am. Most of these are what you might call kind of loud traumas, right? So the emotional neglect, physical abuse. And we do have lack of food security in there as well. So you can kind of see one of the first places that food may show up as an adverse event itself. We follow the tree down to the roots into the soil that it needs to grow, and this is the community. Here we see probably more kind of quiet traumas, things that are just chronic and a little bit less in your face, but we've got lack of jobs and poverty and violence, structural racism. We also have lack of access to nourishment, lack of access to nourishing food. And then we've got the tornado, the environment, wild flat fires, certainly something that's on our minds right now, right? 1 year anniversary just up in LA here in California, not far from where you all are. But as I said, the event is not trauma, right? So here's not it is a long list, but not a complete list of all of the different types of events that could be adverse. We can also think about adverse food events specifically. So stigma and othering related to food. If you think about a child or bringing cultural food into school and facing stigma or shame because of that. Body shaming, control and manipulation. Even if we think about in a very well-meaning way of a parent, finish your broccoli and then you get dessert. So well-meaning. Well, that's a form of control and manipulation around food, and that can have adverse effects for that child later on. Foods linked to culture means that racism and cultural oppression take aim at cultural food traditions, or ingredients. And food can be used by those feeding us to create kind of adverse events as well, as I mentioned. And then the cultural loss that can be experienced when somebody is immigrating or moving or having a change. So we can see lots of ways that we have adverse events in general. Some of them are food specific, some are not. But they all may have an effect on your relationship with food, as we'll see soon. So we've got the event, but that's not the whole formula, right? So it's not the event alone that causes trauma. You may see 2 kids growing up in the same household, having the same experience. One has resulting trauma, one doesn't. So what's the difference there? Well, the difference is how they experience it. And we see that how people experience an event is often related to resilience factors or protective factors. So to briefly define resilience, It's the process of the body and mind adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. And here we might start to introduce the stress response. And this is an optimal stress response. Something stressful happens. We may shoot up towards hyper arousal, our fight or flight response. Maybe we come down towards fawn or freeze, our hypo arousal. But we're able to kind of steady it out and stay in this window of tolerance, stay in this ideal stage, right? And it's resilience that's able to help us to do that. The window of tolerance may be for some smaller or wider. So acute or frequent adversity and stress can shrink that window of tolerance, where having care support widens it. So we're able to better deal with that stressful situation because you got more room, right? You have a wider window of tolerance. So when we think about those adverse events and that stress, adversity, scarcity, trauma, that's the storm raining down, what is the umbrella that we're able to hold up for others to help protect against that storm? So that umbrella may be made up of different protective factors, resources, nourishment, community connections, positive relationships, and knowledge. We can get more into each of those, but we're staying a little bit high level for this presentation. Now, just like we looked at general events that could be adverse and then ones that were specific to food, we see the same thing in the resilience factors and in protective factors. Here's kind of some general ones, but there's also specific ways that nutrition and food can be a protective factor. Concrete support in times of need. So that is a protective factor. And when we're thinking about food, if you need food, concrete support in times of need mean here is food. Here is money for food, SNAP, WIC, school meals, right? So in many ways, we have these support systems that are providing food when it is needed. We may also see knowledge of child development. So knowledge of child development helps caregivers provide age-appropriate nutrition, helps them to recognize hunger and satiety cues, and establish consistent feeding routines, even during adverse times. It enables early identification of nutritional issues and supports responsive feeding practices. This is fostering a positive food environment for the child, which helps to also buffer them from stress and helps to promote stability. Ultimately, it's strengthening a child's resilience to withstand adverse events by ensuring proper nourishment and emotional well-being. So you can see how this caregiver knowledge of child development is helping to support protective factors for the family as a whole, but especially for the child. Another example of how nutrition and food can be a protective factor against stress and trauma is traditional and cultural knowledge. So traditional and cultural knowledge can support nutrition resilience by preserving ancestral food practices, cooking methods, and communal eating habits that help to promote well-being. So access to familiar nutrient-dense foods and culturally rooted healing practices can help maintain food security and that emotional stability. Additionally, these traditions often emphasize resourcefulness, sustainability, and intergenerational support, which can further strengthen a community's ability to navigate challenges. So we see, again, oops, that's build. We have, that umbrella of general protective factors, but we can see how food specifically can play a role to be a protective and resilience building factor as well. So that takes us to the effect. We've got the event that's experienced, and we've thought about how are they experiencing it. And then this is where I really look at the 3 E's as a formula. You take those two things together, and then you're seeing the resulting effect. I think this is a great quote to summarize it. Trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. So to explore the effect, we can look at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, ACEs pyramid, which I imagine many of you are familiar with. Lots of words on here. It's a big pyramid. If you haven't seen it before, you can look at the slides later. You don't need to read every word because it's a lot. So pictured here, this shows the effects of ACEs, adverse child or community events, and their potential effects on health and well-being throughout the lifespan. It shows how childhood experiences, adverse community experiences, and even historical or generational trauma can lead to, so that's kind of like our first two E's, the event and the experience, how these things can lead to disrupted biology, health risk behaviors, poor health, and early death. So to explore the effect, the third E, we're going to dig into this pyramid just a little bit, but at the same time, I do want to note a couple things. So first off, positive experiences, resilience factors, right? We just talked about that. They're not on the pyramid. So that is something to keep in mind. Positive relationships, there's a lot of research that shows that these supportive environments and resilience building factors can help to break the cycle and build resilience. And that's really not accounted for here. So again, put this in the context of our three E's, kind of the bottom, this is where we're kind of seeing the event and the experience. The event itself may likely occur, and then the top is the effect. So really, for now, I'm just going to dig into these top three layers, and we're going to go layer by layer. I'll show them one at a time. So starting with the bottom one that I'm showing now, allostatic load and disrupted neurobiology. So at this level, chronic stress, that allostatic load, can lead to repeated activation of the stress response. So we saw that stress response before. I'm going to show you that was the optimal one. In a couple slides, I'm going to show you a not optimal, a toxic stress response. So when we have that repeated activation of the stress response, this can increase body fat, damaging metabolism and increasing inflammation. This kind of stress response can also lead to disruption in our gut-brain circuitry, which can affect our hunger and satiety cues, and it can contribute to cravings for high-fat and high-sugar foods. And so we don't want people to eat high-fat and high-sugar foods, but when we understand why that might be happening, we can approach that with a little bit more understanding and compassion, right? This can also contribute to issues like poor nutrient absorption, disordered eating, and a higher risk of diet-related diseases. There's also some research showing that weight discrimination contributes to this allostatic load, this chronic stress. So we see that there's really a complex relationship. It's not a simple cause and effect. Things can kind of go both ways. Next up, we have coping adoption of health risk behavior. So many of the behaviors we might see as health risk behaviors, like eating calorie-dense foods, a feast or famine mindset, or eating for emotional regulation, are very effective coping behaviors in reality for the adversity and for the stress that people are facing. So someone with a history of food insecurity, they may eat calorie-dense foods and feast when that food is available. And it doesn't take a lot of thinking to realize why that may happen, right? A sedentary lifestyle will conserve energy for someone who is experiencing extreme stress. Finally, we have the burden of disease and distress. So adverse childhood experiences are associated with conditions like heart disease, sleeping disorders, and even cognitive impairment. And it's important to note that genetics and other factors play a significant role here, right? So there's a lot of nuance in this pyramid, and these are complex relationships. We know that many of these diseases like diabetes and heart disease have a strong genetic component, and they are not simply the result of ACEs or health risk behavior. But the general idea is that adversity can contribute to illness and disease, and food and nutrition can be involved. So understanding these connections can help us to promote resilience and healing. And so the event, the experience, and the resulting effect we covered at the top of the pyramid we see can lead to early death. So what does this all mean? It means that trauma is not just something that happens in the moment. It can have long-lasting effects on a person's life. So I think of this as kind of like the big picture. Like this looks to me almost like a little impersonal, kind of like a population level, right? So I want to zoom in just a little bit and talk about this stress response and talk a little bit about what this might look like for an individual. So we looked at this before. This is showing that optimal stress response, right? And we talked about how having positive experiences and resilience factors can help to widen the window of tolerance, making this optimal stress response a little easier. So let's look at a toxic stress response. right? The lightning bolt's bigger. Whatever it is felt more strongly. And we see that line shoot up and above into the hyperarousal and shooting back down to hypoarousal. We may see them getting stuck off at the bottom or stuck on at the top. At the top, we may see things like anger, anxiety, hypervigilance, hyperactive. At the bottom, depression, numbness, withdrawal, shame, disconnection, lack of motivation. So not only is somebody with a toxic stress response more easily pushed into hypo or hyperarousal because that window may be smaller, right? But they may also have a harder time getting back into the window of tolerance, as you see here. And if we go one more, we can look too at what sort of connection to food this may have, or food and health. We see high blood pressure or low blood pressure. We may see chronic pain, digestive problems, appetite changes, sleeplessness, chronic fatigue. So recognizing the physical symptoms on this slide and the emotional effects that you saw as well can help us to better understand and compassionately reframe challenging behaviors that we may see around food. Can someone truly put in the effort to making regular physical activity part of their life if they're dealing with low blood pressure and chronic pain? You can see why some of the decisions to go to processed foods, things with lots of, reliable, that bag of chips, you know exactly what it's going to be like when you open it, or caffeine. You can see why somebody might turn to that. When I first looked at this slide, I was like, oh my gosh, they found a picture of my dad. And I don't know if anyone else looks at a graph and if they're like, I see this behavior, I see this in somebody who I know. And so just to share a little bit, my dad, if he were to take the ACEs screening, he would have a number up there, higher than my own. And I'm thankful to him that mine is not, right? And he had maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago, he had a pretty significant heart attack. It was called the Widowmaker, actually, and thankfully it did not make my mother a widow. But he had a significant heart attack, and at that time in my life, I was making a big career change. I was taking my master's in nutrition education, and I was able to put things on hold, be like, okay, I'm going to come back. And Dad, I've got all the answers in this textbook. I'm going to come and we're going to do green smoothies and whole wheat bread, and we're going to go on walks. We're going to do all this stuff. And I was, frustrated because he's my dad and I love him. And it was difficult for him. I saw him stuck on the couch for days, not able to get up, waking up at 3 a.m., eating a sleeve of bagels, and when he hadn't been able to eat all day. I would make him something that he had taught me to make. It's not like we ate unhealthy growing up. We were very plant-based beans, home cooked meals. Make him a meal and he's just like, I have no appetite. I just can't, right? And I didn't really understand it at the time. And frankly, I felt frustrated. But understanding this now makes it a little bit easier to frame and see where he was coming from, right? The reality of his situation. And so the reality is we are all in a relationship with food, and it's complicated in the best of times. So how much more complicated is it when you've experienced any of what I just covered? And so when we are going to enter into a conversation about food or a program that touches food with anyone who has any sort of background in the world and any stress at any time, right? It's complicated. And we do not want to narrowly focus on calories in, calories out, or this is a healthy food, right? So what I'm showing you right now is called the meaning of food in life. And we call these different domains. And so there's some studies, I'm not going into the research about this, but the research is really interesting. You might think that somebody who rates very highly in the health domain has the healthiest eating behaviors. And that's actually not the case. What the research actually showed is that people higher in social and moral had higher healthy eating behaviors. So if we are going to enter into conversation about food, not acknowledging anything that we just talked about, and also only talking about the health domain, you should eat this because it's good for you. You shouldn't eat ice cream because it's high in fat and sugar. Well, is anybody eating ice cream because they think it's good for their health? No, like that messaging just doesn't make sense in any way. Um, so we really want to acknowledge this complicated and holistic relationship with food and how food fits into our lives and meets so many more things than simply a nutrition label on the back. So with that, we are going to do a very quick little stretch / rapid recall, and then we're going to move into applying trauma-informed principles to the work that you do, kind of given the foundation that we've just defined. So I'm going to ask you some questions. They'll be true or false. If it's true, you can stretch behind, stretch in front. If it's false, just give it out here. If you are on camera and you want to go off camera, I understand. Okay, trauma is when bad things happen to somebody. What are we feeling? My camera is a little close, but false. Trauma is event plus how they experience it, and then that is leading to the effect. It's not just when a bad thing happens. Trauma can be explained by the 3 E's, the event, how it is experienced, and the lasting effect. Well, I just kind of gave you that answer. That's true. Trauma is not what happens to a person, it is how the body and brain reacts to what happens to them. Okay, first 3 questions kind of really go together there. We're hammering that point home. Resilience is built by never experiencing anything stressful or difficult. We didn't actually talk much about that today, but that's false. It's actually a muscle that kind of needs to be built, and it's you will experience some stress in life and have support to help you move through it, hopefully. People with more positive experiences have better health outcomes. You know what? I didn't update my Q&A for the shorter presentation that we did today, but this is true. There's actually some really great research that looks at positive experiences and how they buffer, regardless of the number of adverse experiences that you have, that positive experiences buffer that result. And that's really encouraging for people doing the type of work that you're doing, because you can't control their history and what has already happened, but you can provide those positive experiences. Protective factors help us to stay in and widen our window of tolerance. Yes, that is true. We talked about that. There are no adverse events associated directly with food and nutrition. Well, that's false. We talked about quite a few. And adverse events and trauma may negatively affect our relationship with food. That is true. Okay. Okay, so moving into the last part of our discussion today, we're going to be talking about the trauma-informed principles and how to incorporate that into your work. Again, we will be looking at SAMHSA's 6 trauma-informed principles as a starting point. I'm only going to go through a couple of them today. We're going to start with safety, trustworthiness, and transparency. Again, assuming that you guys have some familiarity with these principles, but I will be sharing a little bit about how they can be applied. So kind of the guiding question from the participant or a community member perspective for safety, trust, and transparency is, are the people who say they will help me actually helping me? And how do I know that? Now, if you think about safety, I think things that immediately come to mind, like physical safety, maybe you think about emotional safety. And we actually like to push that one step further. And I think this quote sums it up very well. Safety isn't the absence of threat, but the presence of connection. And I think that this is pretty clear and intuitive when you reflect on your own experiences, right? So when do you feel safe enough to be vulnerable, safe enough to kind of grow and push yourself? It's when you feel that connection. Just feeling as though you are not physically under threat, yes, that's important. But to really take it to that next step, we want to see that connection. So some examples of how safety, trustworthiness, and transparency principles can be applied. Maybe asking clients what can be done to make them more comfortable during an appointment or visit or interaction. Identifying what constitutes emotional and physical safety and collaborative treatment planning, remembering that all of this is in the eyes of the individual, and what is emotionally or physically safe to one person is going to be different to another. Thinking about what makes a welcoming environment, images, art, language, lighting, music, volume, all of the things. And always offering an overview of what will happen during the interaction, right? We always, even in a training like we have for today, gave you a really clear expectation of what we were going to do today and what I was going to ask of you. If I had been putting you into breakout rooms, I would have been telling you in advance because I can tell you as soon as I say breakout rooms, people leave. And so really wanting people to be front loaded and knowing what is going to be what is going to happen. So what are some ways that these principles can be applied to food programs specifically? Well, all of the above, yes. Um, you may also think about transparent policies, especially when it comes to eligibility for things like SNAP and WIC. Things right now are changing. And so when there are changes to eligibility for a program, being very upfront and clear about that and in a compassionate way. If you are doing any sort of food distribution, having very reliable distribution days, times, availability, quality of food, transparency in what programs or options are available. Whoops. Okay, so now I invite you to come back to Mentimeter. It's the same one, so if you already have it open, and this is the interaction. This is where I would love to hear from you. So you can enter it on Mentimeter. You can also, please feel free to use the chat if Mentimeter is uncomfortable for you. Oops, sorry, I need to go to the next slide for you, advance it. Okay. And so what are some examples that you can think of from your own work, either things you're already doing, things you've seen happen for others, or things you would like to do that would incorporate safety, trust, or transparency? Give you a couple moments to think and write. Great. Lots of answers here. So we're seeing things about a welcoming environment, group agreements. That's a great way, especially if you're working in a group. For our nutrition education curriculum, that's something that we always do in week one. Being mindful of tone of voice, words, and body language, right? Especially that body language. Offering services in different languages and telehealth for neighbors who don't feel safe right now. Obviously, that is a very important thing and at this exact moment in time. Making eye contact, active listening skills, cultural competence, judgment-free zone. Someone said providing a caring approach to the requirements of the program in advance of enrollment. I was doing a training yesterday on similar topics, but for a very different group, and we were talking about, and I'm not sure if this is what that person meant, but talking about like, yes, it's important to clearly and transparently give the requirements of a program or eligibility, but it's also important to acknowledge like the reality that that person's facing beforehand, especially if it's a change in eligibility or if the requirements of the program are going to be very difficult or more, maybe something that they're not able, so saying something like, I know that this can be frustrating, or it depends on exactly what it is that you're saying, but it's important to kind of have that like human moment, and not just, okay, I've transparently communicated everything, but have you connected first? Um, Making sure to check in more than once how comfortable someone may be in a situation. Yeah, lots of great ideas here. Anything that anybody wants to expand on or ask about what somebody else's might have meant? Okay. I'm going to advance it to the next slide, but we're going to go back to our slides first. Okay, so we'll talk about empowerment, voice and choice, and collaboration and mutuality. So for empowerment, voice and choice, the guiding question here may be, do I get to decide what happens to me? Are other people controlling me? For collaboration and mutuality, it would be, will you help me without making me feel less than? Will I be treated with value and dignity? Are you with me rather than directing me and having power over me? And so some of the examples of how these may be applied, maybe letting the client ask questions and letting them know that there will be time for questions during and after the visit, engaging with patients in a collaborative, non-judgmental fashion when discussing health behavior change. And those were some things, kind of alluded to already in the Mentimeter that you all just did. And I don't think that that's news to anybody, right? And I'm sure that this is something that you all do. But I know for me personally, even though, that experience with my dad, for example, yeah, I didn't go in seeking to like be overtly judgmental towards him. But because I didn't fully understand what he was dealing with, I think that that probably came through, right? Now, if I were in that situation, I think that with that background and that understanding, I'm much better set up to take a compassionate and truly not just non-judgmental, but truly compassionate and empathetic approach to those conversations that he and I had back then. Empowerment, voice, and choice, acknowledging clients' agency and participation in care, if appropriate or possible, allowing opt-out opportunities, asking patients or clients about their priorities and goals for the visit. So if we're talking specifically about how this might be applied in food programs, some additional things you might think about are if you are providing food, is there the ability to provide more choice about food? And this is, frankly, a funding barrier. And so there may not be a lot of opportunity for food choice, but even small things can help. Asking participants what they want and being transparent if you can't meet all of those requests. What sort of food would you like to see at this distribution? And, we don't have refrigeration. We can't provide meat, but we do have the opportunity between these two things. Do you have a preference there? Shared decision making about program enrollment and co-designing programs with other stakeholders or community members. And with that, amplifying the voices of the community who's receiving the program and what those needs truly are. So again, back to Mentimeter, what are some examples that you have seen that you would like to see about incorporating collaboration, mutuality, and empowerment, voice, and choice? And I think it's important to note that it's not a one-to-one relationship of a trauma-informed principle and something that you might do in a program or with a client, right? It's kind of like a many-to-many. So one thing may be, oh, that is addressing safety, but also empowerment. So I think that's helpful to keep in mind. We've got surveys, community outreach engagement. So, ways to get feedback from the community, allowing participants to choose activities as part of a program, open forums, newsletters. Yeah. We regularly poll the community as to how we can serve them better. We offer groups where the community requests something specific. In order to help transitional age youth meet education and career goals, connect them to links in the community for additional services for homelessness, food, mental health, getting feedback, comfortable environment for feedback. Yeah, and I think this is a great example of how safety and empowerment, voice, and choice are related. So they said making sure it's a comfortable environment for feedback and questions both before, during, and after conversations. So if that safety and trustworthiness principle aren't met, how is somebody going to even if you're like, I'm giving you the opportunity to be empowered and voice your opinion, and they're like, I don't feel safe enough to, right? So you can see how there's really overlap. Designing a treatment plan alongside clients and actively reviewing and reassessing the plan. Yeah. Anything somebody would like to elaborate on or ask a question about? Okay. So because, this is a shorter presentation, we're not going through all 6 principles today. So I want to, remind you that we've talked about a lot of things today, and this is hopefully progressing you on your journey to, continue to be trauma informed in your work. I think that sometimes all of the principles and frameworks and language can be sometimes, I think, a little overwhelming. And we have this list of kind of questions, not a checklist. And yes, the slides will be shared. Sorry, I saw that in the chat. That I think are helpful, that I like to come back to say like, okay, if I'm doing these things, then I think that's a good indication that I'm responding with compassion and connection, indicating that I'm taking a trauma-informed approach. So what is it that we can do to reduce stigma, shame, confusion, and tension? When it comes to food, for everyone, we already know that there is a lot of stigma, shame, confusion, and tension, right? Just log on to social media for a second, and there's what is and now, as of 2 days ago, new dietary guidelines are out. Well, that confusion just increased, right? Because now there's different guidance than there was at the beginning of the week. So how are we helping to reduce that and acknowledge it? What are we doing to promote confidence, dignity, and joy when it comes to food, feeding ourselves, feeding our families? If our program is doing that, that's a good sign. How are we inspiring a compassionate and flexible relationship to our bodies, each other, and food? Thinking about that meaning of food in life. Are we welcoming all of those domains, not just the health domain, but also acknowledging the social domain, the sacred, the moral, and how that might be different for every person? Are we fostering other protective and healing factors, knowing that can support that experience, that second E, that those protective factors can build resilience and help to reduce trauma and the effects of trauma? So some key takeaways for what we've discussed today: food and nutrition can be both a source of trauma and a source of resilience. A holistic approach to nutrition security acknowledges the whole person and their experiences. And a trauma-informed approach is good for everyone. So some additional resources and support. So at Leah's Pantry, we do have, like I mentioned, a lot of population-specific programming. So if you are looking for a way to incorporate trauma-informed nutrition education workshops into whatever it is that you do, we have you covered. So we have trauma-informed curriculum for young adults, which I'll talk about in a moment, college students, all the grades K through 12, ECE, caregivers, dads, older adults, and recovery settings. Around the table is our curriculum that's geared towards that like 14 to 21 age group. And it is designed to build food, nutrition, and cooking literacy while integrating social emotional learning and using trauma sensitive facilitation. It is really looking to build mindfulness and leadership skills with youth. It has them split, the cooking portion is not just the facilitator doing a cooking demo and then passing it out. But the kids, the youth themselves are take turns being head chef and they say, okay, you're going to chop the onions, you're going to stir this, you're going to set the table. And then everyone sits and talks around the table. Topics like food, mood, and stress are talked about. So, really integrating the nutrition for physical and mental health functioning. Um, and for this group, it's really looking to build the skills that they're going to need to step out onto their own and provide for themselves. Talking about that relationship of food and mental health and giving them opportunities to take risks to build leadership. So this training is, so all of our curriculum does require training. Here are a couple trainings that are coming up. But there's more. So I'm just dropping a couple things in the chat right now. Food Smarts is another curriculum that we have that is suitable for all ages. There's a kids one that is grades K through 12, and then there's an adults one. That one is very easy to kind of pick apart. Oh, I'm going to do just this activity, or it's going to be a 30-minute lesson. Now it's going to be a 60-minute lesson. It's going to be just a handout at my resource table. So that one's very, very flexible, whereas around the table is meant to be a little bit more of a consistent group. Building nourishing pantries for those of you doing pantry work. And then we also have a version of Food Smarts that's specific for college students that's really built around the needs of that age group. We also do, as I mentioned before, a lot of custom trauma-informed capacity building training. This was, a very short segmented version of it, but we have ones around going deeper into the trauma-informed principles, around nutrition messaging. How do we talk about nutrition with a trauma-informed approach? So like, what are the words that come out of our mouth when we're saying, hey, you should eat more fruits and vegetables? And they're like, they go bad. My family won't eat them. I have limited dollars and I don't have transportation to the grocery store, right? So how do we have both and how do we frame that message in a way that's going to land and be received a bit better? We have some self-care, health equity, and lots of other topics that we cover. I already put the newsletter link there. That's really the best way to stay informed of what we have going on. Our website is leahspantry.org, and you can always reach out to me directly at carrie@leahspantry.org or training@leahspantry.org. We also do have some free resources. So eatfresh.org is a wonderful site. Just if you're looking for a recipe, I use it myself all of the time. But if you are in a program where you want to provide recipes to community members, or that, I need a recipe that's no cook, that is meeting low sodium, you can do all of these filters, find a recipe, use that for your food demo, for example. And that is also a site that is, free and open. We also have a nutrition mini course on that site that is free and open to anybody with an internet connection. That is a great course. Maybe you are not able to provide nutrition education yourself, but you want to connect clients or community members to it. The mini course is free. There's about 20 different modules, and each module is like 5 to 10 minutes, super specific topic. It's interactive e-learning. So I encourage you to check that out. We also have podcasts and some free webinars on our site as well. So feel free to explore the resources and reach out if you are looking for something and you're not sure. We probably have it. And with that, we've got some time for questions, comments. Thank you, Joy. Thank you all for having me. Thank you. Well, I will put my email once more into the chat. Please feel free to reach out at any time. And I think I will be turning it back over to Sarah.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Carrie. That was awesome. So much good information to just be able to not only apply to our own lives, but apply to like the programs that yeah, that we're doing out in the field right now. Yeah, it's all great information. So yeah, if anybody has any like questions that comes up, like as we're chatting about other things, please feel free to like unmute yourself or put it in the chat, and then we can always go back to it. If you think of a question that you can't think of right now, that's totally fine. Other than that, I just guess we'll move into Connect OC updates. So, yeah, we have a lot of resource fairs coming up in the spring. Cal State Fullerton, UCI. We have Fullerton College, Santa Ana College. So we're all over the place. And so thank you to those who are coming already. And if you are interested in being part of one of those, please feel free to reach out to me as well. I will go ahead and pass it to Erin if Erin has any updates on her end.
Yes, excited to share that we have the fourth annual Veteran in Art Resource Expo happening at Coastline College on February 6th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And this is for all veterans and their families in Orange County. And will also be attended by Coastline College students. So if you have a veteran in your life, I'm going to drop the flyer and please share this with them. It's an amazing event. We have over 40 resource tables for veterans. We have 3 art workshops, sharing art therapy going out throughout the day. And we even have a horse from the Shea Writing Center, the Therapeutic Writing Center coming. So excited to share that. And then, as always, I am sharing the cultural arts and mental health outreach program called Mindful Expressions. And that is at no cost for our partner organizations. We work with transitional age youth who endure difficult life experiences, and we share the cultural arts as a platform to improve mental health. So if you have any questions about that as well, my info is already in the chat. And yeah, just thank you for the great presentation, Carrie. That was really interesting.
Thanks, Erin. All right, so yeah, I guess we'll just open it up to all of you. If you have any program updates on your end, we'd love to hear. Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand, whatever you're comfortable with.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Carrie, for the amazing, amazing presentation. I was taking notes because I was like, this is brilliant. It looks like we work in similar fields. We overlap because I work with the Thrive team at UC Irvine's School of Nursing. I am the study coordinator for the Thrive Study or the Thrive program, which is a free health coach program offered to youth ages 11 to 14 who've experienced ACEs. We do have a screening survey that they would have to complete to see if they're eligible, but we're looking to help and support youth with an ACEs score of 4 or more, or a youth that has presented with ACE-related conditions, right? Some of those things that you were talking about. The program is completely virtual. They work with a coach one-on-one for 6 weeks. And the great thing about it is that we're not just facilitating the coaching with the youth, but also an important caregiver in their lives. So we know kids typically mirror what they see a caregiver in proximity to them doing. And the coaching program is meant to empower both the youth and their caregiver, helping them set some goals, focusing on stress busters, educating them on what ACEs are, and helping them develop healthy self-regulation and coping skills. If you do think that you would be more interested in sharing this with any 11 or 14-year-olds or have any other further questions, my colleague Brianna just put the flyer in the chat, and I could also be more than happy to follow up with you via email to share it with you. But yeah, we're just getting the word out. It is funded by NIDA, so it is a grant-funded study, and we'll be enrolling for the next 2 years. We're set to recruit 250 families, so every little bit of help we can get really, really counts. And yeah, I'm just glad to have been able to attend this. This is my first Connect OC meeting, so it's a pleasure to meet everybody, and I hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate it. Anybody else have any updates?
Hi, this is Dr. Carranza. I just wanted to invite everybody on the call today to the Building Trauma Informed Communities Conference through the North Orange County or North Orange Continuing Education Center. TUP will be one of the featured speakers. We're actually doing a presentation on trauma, health, and tobacco, and the majority of our presentation really focuses on the ACEs Aware 7 stress busters. So really, how do we integrate those into our lives? How do we support community members in integrating those as a way to prevent tobacco use prevention? There's going to be a lot of other wonderful presentations that day as well. So I'll go ahead and put the link to register in the chat. Um, Registration is free. The nice thing about this particular conference is it is open to parents, to grandparents, caregivers, as well as staff that are working, with the community. So if you know anybody that is interested, please feel free to share that with them. I believe registration closes on January 29th or once capacity is reached. So please feel free to share, and I hope to see some or all of you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Carranza, I'd love to follow up with you via email if possible, and if you feel comfortable, do you mind putting your email in the chat?
Oh,
Or I can also
absolutely.
DM you.
Absolutely. So my email's in the chat. You're welcome to reach out to me as well as anybody else.
Hi there. This is Spot from STC. We're also Straight Talk Counseling. We're in the middle of a rebrand. I just wanted to remind everybody that we offer free mental health services to Santa Ana residents who are low income. We also have free services for folks who are living with HIV/AIDS, and otherwise we offer no insurance needed mental health services on a sliding scale. And we are located in Santa Ana and also in La Mirada. We do telehealth from anywhere. And I know that it's been a tough several years, but like in particular, the last week's been really rough. So if you have anyone in your networks who could use our services, please pass that along. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Spot. Anybody else?
Hi.
Spot, can we?
I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask real quick, Spot, can we get your contact information so that we can get a hold of you?
Yes, absolutely. One moment.
Thank you.
Hi, I just put in the chat OC workforce events. We have a lot of hiring events coming up for any youth that might be interested or college age. And what's wonderful about this is they can get interviewed on the spot, and there's ways to prepare in advance. There are on-site case managers to help them navigate if they've never done a career event, and they could contact in advance to update their resume or create one from scratch. So I hope you can share this. We serve from all the way from La Habra to Huntington Beach and Newport, all the way to San Clemente. And case managers are available on site. And I'm glad to be here today. Thank you, Carrie, for your presentation. Because again, we could try to help get people jobs, but if they don't feel good, it's difficult for them to show up. So thank you for all the links and the individuals who are in this room today.
Thanks, Terry. Anybody else?
Hello. I just wanted to introduce myself. This is my first OC, Connect OC Coalition meeting. So thank you for having me. Nice to see you again, Sarah. We were able to connect a few months ago. So good to be here. My name is Katera. I work with a nonprofit organization by the name of Minding Your Mind. We support K through 12 graders primarily with youth-led speakers that speak to their personal experiences with mental health, but then they tie in the psychoeducational aspects regarding it. Our major, motive is to destigmatize seeking mental health support among the youth. We tend to take a more so wraparound service approach. We have clinician-led programs that also support parents caregivers, staff members, community organization staff members, for them to receive some psychoeducation as well. I'm in the Los Angeles region. My regional director is in San Diego. So we tend to support community organizations and schools in those general regions. This is Sire. He is my personal assistant. Um, but yes, I just wanted to introduce myself and thank you for having me here for the coalition. It's been amazing information that I was able to, take and receive today and kind of like incorporate that into my wheelhouse. So I'm glad to be here. Really excited to meet everybody and connect with everyone, and I look forward to the future meetings as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Good seeing you. Any last updates? All right. Really quick, Crystal posted in the chat about the survey. If you would take the survey just really quick. Yeah, it would mean a lot to us. It just helps us to know more about the topics that you all want to hear about and just makes these meetings better and yeah, how we can connect you all better to resources that are already existing in the county. So yeah, please take the survey when you can. Our next meeting is Friday, February 13th, on Zoom. Erin will be hosting that one, which will be really good. It's gonna be a really great presentation. So definitely recommend coming if you are all available. Other than that, have a great rest of your day, rest of your weekend. Yeah, and we'll see you again real soon. Thanks, everyone.